We had sold Short Circuit. It went for $500,000. It was a big deal. It catapulted Maddox Wilson into the A-list suddenly. Nobody knew who they were. They were very atypical for Hollywood. Brett and Steve had worked with Ron in his educational film company, and so they all worked together, and they had this great working relationship. They had this mutual respect. When they wrote Short Circuit, there was some buzz around it. So Ron stepped off. He knew that the guys had waited for a long time. It couldn't bear the weight of 3 newbies, in a sense, particularly if it went big. So the promise was that they would use their clout to launch Ron. I personally believed it could be done, and when I have a vision that something could be done, I usually can get it done. I founded an independent talent agency. I didn't allow my clients to be pigeonholed. If they could write a movie of the week or create a series, as well as write a motion picture, then I went for it. And in most agencies, if you were slotted, if you were a story editor, they wouldn't look at your movies. They wouldn't allow you to do short form. And because I built my agency from scratch and handpicked the talent, I could take a gamble on people. And I had taken a gamble on quite a few people, and it took me about 4 years to build the company. And it was just getting going when Short Circuit walked in the door. Steve is very much the plot guy. He's the action master. He can write action like no one, all right? And he can write action gags and inventive action. He also writes particular kind of characters within the action genre. Brent is the comedian. He writes these out there characters, a master at comedy and the comedic gag. In their writing style, they work in a very unique way. Once they plot out and design the script, after they've done a very, very detailed treatment, they start writing, and one starts from one end of the script and the other starts from the other end of the script. And then they switch in the middle and they rewrite each other until they blend the script, and they do many drafts in this unique format, which is, in a sense, a battle between the two of them to get the best of each one. And it is a battle, as I've worked with them for many years, that they feel is the best blend for the idea, to execute the idea. Brett and Steve, they were writing big assignments for Hollywood, and I took it around with them and set up meetings, pitch meetings, where they would pitch the treatment, and absolutely no one got it. They just didn't get it. It wasn't straight action. It wasn't straight comedy. It wasn't really Jaws. It wasn't this. It was every no in the book that they could find to say this isn't a viable movie. Yet we all believed that it was. The boys had crafted a treatment, which we all liked. Ron Underwood included, because he was going to be attached. And he was attached out of a promise. And this movie had a vision behind it, and it had a promise. And those are powerful driving forces. Almost 6 years in, I said to Brett and Steve, I said, you're going to have to spec this. That was a really hard decision. They were among the highest paid writers in Hollywood at the time. They certainly had the clout, their work had the clout, but to take the time out from a thriving career that you'd waited your life to have and spec a script is a ballsy move. It took about 6 months, and they went off and they would not let us see it. They would not let me see it. And finally, at close to the 6-month mark, I said, I'm sending the script police to your house. Your time's up. I don't care what it is. Somebody's going to show up at your door, and they're going to bring it to me. The messenger's going to bring it to me, and I'm going to read it. And so I think after they were on probably their 8th draft of it, because their process is arduous in this back and forth dynamic that they craft their material out of. And I read it and I liked it. And I felt it was close, but I felt that there was something off. There had to be a decision. Was it comedy or was it horror? And when I first got the script finally, it was almost even. And that balance had to be shifted for it to really, really work. In the time where they were writing it, I was setting up a campaign for how I thought this movie could get made, for who I thought could actually be real partners with Maddox Wilson and Underwood, to allow Underwood to direct, and who as a production entity, studio entity, would let them do it, have a chance of, quote, getting the movie in the first place. And that's how I cultivated Jim Jacks. I made it my business to create a relationship with Jim Jacks. So it's a cold meeting. It's a meeting that I'll never forget it. He was sitting behind his desk. He had a baseball bat, and he said, "You're an agent. I hate agents. Why should I do business with you?" I said, "Because I have really, really good talent." And I said, "There are not many of them, but they're worth your time." And that sort of stopped him, because he was a no bullshit guy, and it was no bullshit. And he got it, and we ended up developing a wonderful rapport and working relationship. And he had the independent mindset of the independent filmmaker with all of his work with the Coen brothers. And because of that, he would understand the genre-crunching nature of Tremors. For me, I'm basically producing the movie. I'm plotting the selected moves. You can't do that if you don't have an absolute committed, single-minded vision. And part of that is also selecting the right people to listen to you. I mean, there's some people I could have said everything right, and with all the power and the passion, I could have given them the best script and they never would have gotten it. So you really have to look at the chessboard. You're playing a chess game, and you're playing a chess game for keeps. Actually, I had picked 3 production entities and producers that I thought would get this movie and had clout within their own studios and had the passion for very unique projects. And one of them was Tony Garnett's company, where Amy Pascal was. Gail's company had just formed Pacific Western and No Frills. And I really actually took it to Amy and Tony first. He was a wonderful British director. He died this last year. He had really great taste. He said, "I like this, it's just not for me." Amy and I had a conversation, and in that conversation we discussed Gail. Through that, I got it to Ellen. In trying to do this economically and surgically is the word I would use, I was picking particular production companies within the vast studio network, production companies that had deals with the studio, where when they were given permission to read the script, they would not cover it at the studio. Because if you submit something, the last thing you want is bad coverage to circulate out in the ether on a project, particularly a project that is challenging. The principals had to read it themselves and make a decision on it themselves. If they didn't like it, no harm, no foul, but I didn't want it to go into the big studio system because it would make a hard process more difficult. So Ellen gave it to Gail. Gail liked it. Gail and I had a meeting, and she then met the boys. She met Ron. Gail and I struck a deal that she would only go to 3 studios. And then if it failed, we would stop and reconsider. And the 3 studios were Fox, because she had to go to Fox, because that was the umbrella for Pacific Western and No Frills. I didn't think Fox would like it, though I was but I knew she had to do it. Then she wanted to go to Disney. I understood why she wanted to go to Disney, but I didn't think it was for Disney either, because Michael Eisner didn't like dust, and I knew he would never get this movie, not for one hot second. Okay, and it's true, and he used to talk about it. And I knew Disney very well. I had deals with Disney. My favorite was Universal. That's where I wanted to see this land, because I felt that there was enough support there that if Jim Jacks could come on board with Gail, this piece would have a real fighting chance, because I could also speak myself on behalf of it to the upper echelons where I had wonderful relationships. By this time I'd already had a solid relationship with Jim Jacks, and I knew that he would champion it. So it was a nail biter to wait through the Fox and Disney passes. As this campaign progressed, I called Maddock and Wilson into my office and I said, you should be producers on this. And they were sort of questioning, and I said, look, you also are filmmakers. And if you really want to babysit this, if you really want to make it come to fruition with the vision you have on paper, I believe you have the right to do it. And I believe you would be protective of Ron going in as a first time, because the three of you have a really good dynamic. And I said, I think that should be part of the deal. And that became part of the deal. I felt it was critical that they be on the set because of the nature of this material, and they would be an on-set resource for Ron constantly. If something had to be cut, they could bridge it right then and there. They could reinvent it. They were the writers. They understood the full superstructure and all the skeleton of this. And so sometimes, through production needs, gag fails. You have to make a decision right there. Do you make a good decision or do you make a bad decision? But if you have the writers who are also producers who have some sway in that, that's how you end up with a good product as opposed to an inferior product. I went up at various times. I went up for the beginning of the shoot just to see how the guys were doing. A phone call is one thing, but to be able to sit and have a quiet meeting with them about how they felt, about were they getting the right support. And at one point, it was really critical that I do that, because it was clear that Ron was making his days, but it was not easy. And because the gags were so complicated, and this was a daylight shoot, and you couldn't hide things in a daylight shoot. I certainly give big kudos to Jenny Nugent, because she really was the line producer. She was on the line, and I mean on the line, every day to get film in the can. You're given a shot as a director, and you're given 1 week to prove yourself. Not 2 days, not a week and a half, 1 week. So this was always a challenge, to work under the anvil of perhaps being thrown off the movie that you've waited over 6 years to direct. So the strengths that I think Ron has are imperceptible to certain kinds of talent. Ron is not a bombastic director, but he is a relentless one. He is a relentless perfectionist. He has incredibly strong casting instincts. He is the master of subtlety and nuance. His work doesn't ring fake. The characters do not ring fake. If you go and watch Tremors today, you enjoy those characters because they seem so real. He does not push the emotion. He doesn't engage in hyperbole. I think he has a fantastic sense of nuancing characters and getting that out of the cast so he has that true emotion on the screen. I don't think Ron has weaknesses behind the camera. I think he knows what he's doing behind the camera. I think his quiet manner might be perceived as weakness by some, but I think that that's unfair. he casts for the right quality.
Pardon my French.
He doesn't cast stereotypically.
Look, we arm ourselves, we set perimeters, we stand guard.
Michael Gross, completely against cast. The Burt Gummer character could have been very easily a total caricature. He is a compulsive character, and that's the way he's written, but he toned down Michael's performance. So I think that it played very well within the mix of the others. It could have easily unbalanced the movie.
Bert, cut it out!
I think I scared him.
The studio was reacting positively. I give great credit to Jim Jacks on that, who was supportive if there was any overage, if we had to drop a half a day. He certainly argued for our ability for the crew and Ron to make that day up. The studio loved the movie, but they did not know how to market it. Tremors got released as a sleeper.
Perfection. A scorched outpost in the middle of nowhere.
You know how close I am to leaving this place right now? How close?
Maybe that's why Val and Earl decided to leave town.
But the marketing campaign just never could nail it on a clear log line to get the audience in. And so they didn't keep it in theaters that long. But because it didn't have a big number, the studios always sort of calculate, is it worth making a remake or a sequel? Because what they do, the rule is that the sequel, it would be largely, should be 2/3 of the budget of the original. And the original was at $10 million, and we had to beg, and we did get, to the support of the studio, an extra $1 million to make that movie. So it was at 11 and change to get Tremors made. So they couldn't, in their numbers, justify the box office, didn't justify making a sequel.
They lay dormant for years, waiting for the chance to appear once again. Now they're back, and they'll find you no matter where you try to hide.
But the profits from the videos and the awareness from the videos justified it. It just took time. And by that time, many things had changed. The team was doing a lot of work, writing a lot of movies for Universal. The idea was, let's do the sequel, and Steve Wilson was set to direct. The studio didn't understand the Shriekers at all. So Steve Wilson, being a stop-motion animator, had written a book on stop-motion animation, which is a classic. Steve Wilson and I flew up to San Francisco to meet with Phil Tippett, who was doing all of the stop-motion pre-work for Jurassic Park. And there was a question at that time whether whether Jurassic Park was going to be stop motion or this new thing, quote, CGI. The minute they saw the animated Shrieker, they got it. They sent us to the video division, and we took a $14 million movie and cut it down to a $2 million direct-to-video. And I can tell you, because I put together everyone who made that movie. I put that team together. It was hard. The direct-to-video division was making a huge profit off of these. And what we had wanted to do is get each of the Stampede partners to direct. That was part of the goal. And to say something individual with each one of these men, even though Brent and Steve did not get the budgets to fully show their talents in 2 and 3 that Ron had with the original movie. What we really wanted to do was to hopefully show the studio that they had a cash cow and that they would let us come out of this platform, but they were actually making significant money in it, and that was their calculus. And after 4, we didn't feel like we had the budgets we didn't feel we could say anything more. We didn't want to mind this. We didn't want the characters or the movies to become caricatures of themselves. We didn't want to, I mean, you can do gun gags forever and ass blaster gags forever, but you know, the guys are more talented than that, and it certainly wasn't worth their time or their money to be doing that with their career, and so it was time to say goodbye. I think the original concept of Tremors, of Steve Wilson sitting on the rock and thinking, what if I can't get off this rock, is a metaphor for many things. It's a metaphor, actually, for somewhat what we're living now today in the COVID world, where we can't get out of our houses. You know, it's all these unknowns that we don't have control over, and I think it's fear.
Damn, I lost. Guess I'll have to do it.
I think the movie says that survival is a team sport. You know, we're living in this town, which Val and Earl were in a hurry to get out of, and yet they were all rugged individualists. They chose that town. They chose that town for a reason. They were happy there. It speaks to a time when things were simpler, when people felt they had their own power in a certain way. The Western spirit, I think all of these things are in that movie. I think it's real Americana.